The Midnight Diner, a tale of comedy and reflection. On a quiet street corner in Brooklyn, there stood a small diner that opened only when the rest of the city had gone to bed. Its neon sign flickered gently against the night sky. Joe's Diner, open midnight to dawn. The warm golden light spilling from its windows was like a beacon for night owls, loners, and dreamers alike. Joe, the gruff yet kind-hearted owner, was as much a part of the diner as its creaky stools and stained countertops. Known for his simple but comforting dishes, he served more than just food. He offered a listening ear and a safe space to share stories. Tonight, the diner was unusually quiet. Only the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional clink of Joe's utensils filled the air. The doorbell chimed suddenly, and in walked a man wearing a threadbare jacket and a weathered baseball cap. His eyes were tired, but his face still carried the faint traces of a mischievous smile. "Hey, Joe," the man greeted, sliding onto a stool. Joe looked up from behind the counter, his ever-present cigarette dangling from his lips. "Haven't seen you in a while, Eddie." Eddie Moore was a once famous stand-up comedian. Years ago, his name was on billboards, his jokes filled comedy clubs, and his face appeared on late-night TV. But those days were long gone. Now, Eddie was just another middle-aged man trying to navigate life after the spotlight had dimmed. "What'll it be?" Joe asked, already pulling out a skillet. "You know me, Joe, same as always. Scrambled eggs and toast," Eddie replied, resting his elbows on the counter. Joe raised an eyebrow. "Sure you don't want the special tonight?" Eddie hesitated, then grinned. "All right, hit me with it." Joe nodded and began whisking eggs with practiced ease. He added a splash of cream, salt, and pepper, then poured the mixture into the sizzling pan. As the aroma of cooking eggs filled the diner, Eddie leaned back and sighed. "Rough night?" Joe asked, breaking the silence. "Rough decade," Eddie quipped. "Did a set at this dive bar earlier. 5 people in the crowd, and I'm pretty sure 2 of them were asleep." Joe smirked. "Comedy's a tough business." "Tell me about it," Eddie said, his tone turning somber. "Used to be, I'd walk into a room and people would light up. Now, they don't even look at me twice. Guess I'm just yesterday's news." Joe slid the plate in front of him. On it was a simple yet elegant dish, a fluffy mound of scrambled eggs served alongside golden toast and a small scoop of hash browns. Eddie stared at it for a moment, then chuckled. "You always know how to cheer a guy up, Joe." As Eddie took his first bite, the doorbell chimed again. A young man in his early 20s entered, his face lighting up when he spotted Eddie. "No way," the newcomer exclaimed, walking up to him. "You're Eddie Moore. I saw your special on YouTube, Eddie's World. You were hilarious." Eddie blinked, taken aback. Yeah, that's me." "I've been trying to get into stand-up myself," the young man continued, pulling up a stool. "You're one of my biggest inspirations." Eddie didn't know whether to feel flattered or embarrassed. "Well, kid, if you're looking for advice, I've got plenty of stories about what not to do." The young man laughed. "I'd love to hear them. Seriously, though, your work means a lot to me." For the next hour, Eddie shared tales from his glory days, some funny, some bittersweet. He talked about the highs of performing in sold-out theaters and the lows of bombing at small-town open mics. The young man listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes on a napkin. "Do you ever miss it?" the young man asked. "The fame, I mean." Eddie stared at his empty plate, his smile fading. Sometimes, but it's not just about the fame. It's about making people laugh. That's the real magic. And when you lose that spark, well, it feels like losing a part of yourself. The young man nodded, his expression thoughtful. But you haven't lost it. You just made me laugh tonight, didn't you? Eddie looked up, startled. Yeah, I guess I did. Joe, who had been quietly wiping down the counter, chimed in. You know, Eddie, the world's still out there. It's never too late to give it another shot. Eddie chuckled. Maybe you're right, Joe. Maybe I've been too busy feeling sorry for myself to see what's still possible. The young man smiled. If you ever do another show, let me know. I'll be front row. Eddie nodded, a renewed sense of purpose flickering in his eyes. Thanks, kid. And good luck with your own journey. Just remember, it's not about being the best. It's about being true to yourself. The young man left shortly after, but Eddie stayed a little longer, finishing his coffee and chatting with Joe. As the first rays of dawn broke through the diner's windows, Eddie stood to leave. Thanks for the meal, Joe, he said, slipping a few bills onto the counter. Joe gave him a rare smile. Anytime, Eddie. As Eddie stepped outside, the city was waking up. The streets were still quiet, but there was a sense of possibility in the air. He pulled his jacket tighter against the morning chill and began walking, his mind buzzing with ideas for new jokes. Maybe the world had changed, but Eddie realized he still had something to offer. And perhaps, just perhaps, there were still a few laughs left in him. Inside the diner, Joe watched him disappear into the early light. He shook his head and returned to his work, the smell of eggs and coffee filling the room once more. The diner was always there, a quiet refuge for those who needed it, a place where stories began anew.